Dr. Vijay, any philosophical questions this week?
Yes, Prabhu. The second instruction of Nectar of Instruction, Siksha Amrita, is one of the instructions contained in it, is that one's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in one of the 6 activities, and I'm talking about only one activity, especially here, is over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. So, and then there is, from the Goswami's teaching, I believe, a story of the sparrow, involving sparrow and the ocean, and Garuda, the chariot carrier of Lord Vishnu, where it would seem that the sparrow did, even emptying a bucket of water would seem like an over-endeavor for a sparrow, let alone the whole ocean. So how are we to understand this over-endeavoring in light of that particular, the transcendental story that was cited by the Goswamis, getting help from Garuda?
To a degree, not entirely, but to a degree, it's an apples and oranges question, and therefore it'll be an apples and oranges answer. Not entirely. I'll use the analogy here of a Hollywood movie star. And we'll use the analogy of someone who wants to be a Hollywood superstar or an icon. Those are limited. Those are basically almost as limited as becoming president, in which I could use that one too, say president of the United States, but I prefer in Hollywood here. So if somebody who doesn't have, like his father was in Hollywood and opens doors for him, or his mother was a star actress and opens doors for him, there many of the current big stars in Hollywood, and they've had their doors open for them because their parents were in Hollywood well established. But there's some that had to work up right from the bottom rung. And it's very difficult to become a major star in Hollywood, working your way up from the bottom rung, all the hoops you have to jump. It would qualify as the Sanskrit that you're referring to as laulium. Extreme endeavor for attaining something. The situation of the sparrow was reactionary. That's why the apples and oranges. The sparrow had her eggs taken away. She wasn't endeavoring for something big. She had her babies that were about to hatch taken away. It was a reaction. It was, how can you do this to me? She wasn't trying to do something big. She was reacting. So it's not in the category of laulium. Trying to become, in the case of what I just said, trying to become a star in Hollywood is laulium. Either as an actress or an actor, either way. You have to make all kinds of endeavor. You have to make all kinds of compromises. We're not going to go into all that, and you have to have quite a bit of talent, and you have to develop that talent more and more. Again, I could go into great detail here why. That's not the purpose of the answer, is to go into detail of the analogy I'm using. But that qualifies as laulium, because of, say, you take 1,000 persons that, either just after they get out of high school or sometimes even before, or maybe they just graduated from college, and they gravitate to Hollywood, and, this is it. They're dedicating their life to become a star or superstar, or an icon even, which again is extremely rare to become an icon. I could start naming icons and I would run out of names very quickly. So that's laulium. That's over endeavor for a mundane thing that if you achieve it, you get tremendous sense gratification in every single way possible. But the sparrow was not endeavoring for anything like that. The sparrow was just outraged. Why'd you take my young hatching? They were about to hatch. Why'd you do this to me? And so the sparrow was in a state of despair. It wasn't a desire. It was a reactionary state of despair. And therefore, because she was in such despair, she just said, I'm going to take you one bucket at a time. An impossible task. But then Garuda came down and said, well, I can maybe accomplish that. And then, all right, yeah, no, well, I haven't crushed those eggs yet. I'll give them back. Does this answer your question?
Yes, it does, Prabhu. Thank you for this wonderful insight. Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
Dr. Ernest, any philosophical questions this week?
Yes. So we so there is this quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. I was looking for it just today, just maybe hour before, but I couldn't now find it. But it is basically that one search for a guru, one cannot find it by his own endeavor. One has to get Krishna's mercy to get a bona fide guru. One can get bona fide guru by Krishna's mercy. So my question is, let's say that how one should then act. Let's say one goes to some holy place, to Vrindavan or pilgrimage, maybe several places. Should one actively search, or should one internally somehow pray to Krishna and just be patient?
It's an excellent question, and it has a number of answers connected to it. It's not really a simple answer per se. Now, since you're not bringing out the quote, I can't see the quote in context. If you brought out the quote specifically, I could see it in the context of where he said that and how he said it and what else he said in connection to it. To me, it's a two-way street. That's how I view it. Now, as we discussed last week, no, that wasn't last week, but whenever it was, there's a chain of command in the universe, and it's a very intricate and complex chain of command. The natural inclination of all living entities in the universe is rebellion. We see that Lord Brahma stole the cowherd boys from Krishna. There's an element in there that you have to question. We see that Lord Shiva went into combat with Lord Krishna. And we're talking the highest demigods possible here. Plus, both of them are head of a sampradaya. Indra, what a rascal he was on certain occasions. So even at these high levels of the, Indra, head of the administrative demigods, and Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, part of the causal demigods, with Lord Vishnu, who takes the role of demigod in Sattva Guna, controlling that guna, but really not a demigod. And Lord Shiva is 84%, whereas Jivas are 78%. So Lord Shiva is in the Shiva Tattva, his own category of Tattva. But, of course, he does have a feature as a demigod. There's no question on that, in charge of the mode of ignorance, ultimately, from the causal plane. So the issue here is that the, what is it called? Why am I blanking out on this word? I'm blanking out on it. Anyway, that's what happens once in a while. The natural inclination of the living entities in the material world is rebellion. Now, the animals, the birds, the reptiles, etc., total rebellion. No subservience whatsoever. Most of the humans, total rebellion also. And therefore for them, although technically they have free will, really they don't. In practical, they don't. Default, that's the word I was thinking of. The default is rebellion. For example, and I've given this example before in a bathtub, the default is the cold water. This is not always the case, of course. Of course, it's almost in one sense never the case, but we're using it as an analogy. So you have to manually turn off the cold water and you have to manually turn on the hot water. If you do nothing, the default is the cold water. For example, the default is cold. Warmth is the exception. The default is dark. Light is the exception. The default is rebellion. So there's an intricate hierarchy going all the way up ultimately to the Parameshvara, Lord Vishnu, who is to be worshipped. And he has final sanction. Nothing can be done without his sanction. You may say, well, how can that all go? Because there's a different time scale. Completely different time scale. There's a completely different time scale on the astral plane. You know, this plane that we're on, this material plane, physical plane, earth, water, fire plane, not all the living, most of the living entities in the universe don't have this plane. They're on a plane subtler than this. Or if they have earth, water, and fire, it's a more subtle form of earth, water, and fire. It gives less pain, for example. It's less binding, etc. But we're in the gross. So things that happen fast here, like a bullet, is slow on other planes and can be stopped because of that. Or can be, just like, for example, I don't do this, of course, but say I'm going to shoot some animal out there in the forest. I'm on the front deck right now. So say I got a high-powered rifle with a tremendous scope, etc. I don't, for sake of analogy. So I'm out here, so I got the high-powered rifle, tremendous scope on it, etc. And I'm going to shoot an animal that's 150 yards away. But the slightest deflection of my, say I just have a nervous reaction, a very slight nervous reaction in my shoulder, and the bullet misses by a mile. I'm using that figuratively, of course. Because a slight deflection at the source of when the trigger is pulled is a huge deflection when it reaches 150 yards. So, as Paramatma, Krishna can change things that are going to happen on this plane very easily by very slight interferences that can't be noticed. So I know I'm approaching this question in a roundabout way, but you have to understand it in the way that I'm answering it to really get the proper perspective. I see it as a two-way street. But the fact of the matter is, since Lord Vishnu is the final sanction, and again, to repeat, it's most important to understand this, or at least get some perspective on it. At least get the jnana. If you can't get the vijnana, get the jnana. I'm giving you the jnana. It's good enough if that's the only, if you can get the vijnana, all the better. But even if you can only get the knowledge and not realize it, it's still valuable. Everything that happens on this plane has to go through a chain of command of approval and can be stopped at any level, and it must reach Vishnu. Now you may say, well, Vishnu would be overwhelmed. He's not at all overwhelmed because he almost never interferes. Even to say that he rarely interferes is not accurate. He very, very rarely interferes. And usually his only time that he interferes is on behalf of his devotees, and he only interferes when their purity and their sincerity and their seriousness merits it. Merits it in his eyes, not merits it in the eyes of other devotees or etc. In other words, he's the final arbiter, he's the final overseer and permitter, he's the final sanctioner, but it's automatic. For all practical purposes, it's automatic. Vishnu automatically approves whatever the downline demigods, when it reaches him. Through the chain of those demigods involved in the specific action. So now we take and we go to the action of searching out a guru. Well, if Vishnu has to approve everything, which he does, then isn't that a form of mercy in one sense? You can say, well, it's not mercy. The demigods were deciding this extremely bad, big karmic reaction, horrific, gruesome, a murder, etc., and he approved it. But the fact is that if he approved it from one perspective, it's mercy. It may be difficult to comprehend, but since he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how can there be anything but mercy from him? If we say that there's anything not merciful in him, then God is evil, to at least some extent. We all know that if the Supreme Lord kills a demon, that bare minimum, Brahma Sayuja. Bare minimum. Putana got a position of mother in the spiritual world. So how can anything that Vishnu approves of not be his mercy from one perspective, at least whether you can understand it or not? So now we go to search for a guru. Again, I don't have this quote from Bhaktisiddhanta in context, so I have to take it in the form of how it is being given to me, which is not flawed necessarily, but is not in context. But the fact of the matter, it's a two-way street. Now, when Prabhupada, when his movement was gaining steam, etc., in the early 70s in particular, you could include late 60s, but it really didn't really take off until the early 70s. I mean, it was gradually each year increasing significantly, but at the same time, it really took off in the early 70s. But anyway, that's my perspective. And the day I joined, Sunday, February 16th, 1972, was the day that Prabhupada wrote a letter to one of his female disciples saying, is that no more letters to me. Take this up with your president or your governing body commissioner. So you could say the day I joined was the day that Prabhupada said, my movement is growing so fast I can't handle this anymore. And I never did write him a letter because I was told by everybody, don't write Prabhupada letters. I was told that. And I did what I was told. I was a very obedient disciple of Prabhupada. I didn't like what I was told sometimes. That was not rare that I didn't like it. But I did it because I understood the principle of the downline. Because Prabhupada's movement was meant to function just like the universe functions with the hierarchy of the demigods. It was meant to function like that, with Prabhupada in the role of Vishnu. And so you follow your orders, even if you can see that the order is motivated. Well, of course, by the late 70s, it became absurd. So, I mean, because if you followed the orders, you weren't connected. I mean, I knew when I was connected, and I knew when I wasn't. But at any rate, the point of the matter is this. You're searching for a guru. When I was searching, I underwent severe risks and austerities. Now, the austerities were, to some degree, in the mode of ignorance sometimes, yes. And the risks also, some of those were in the mode of ignorance too. But the fact of the matter is that I had no idea what the absolute truth was. And this was an important realization for me. These were distressing days and weeks and months when I first took hallucinogens. You got the heavenly pleasure from it. But once that karma wore off and you used up your allotment of goodness that you had built up, then you got the distressful realizations. That's how drugs worked for me anyway. So, once I started hallucinogens, even before hallucinogens, I was already skeptical about becoming, I was in good shape. I had a journalism scholarship to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, full ride. I immediately became an established sports writer for that newspaper, Daily Cardinal, which was one of the top 5 in the nation on campuses. Really well done newspaper. It was really now what was in it is another thing because it was radical shit. But the fact is that the sports section was excellent. Excellent writing, excellent layouts. I worked my way up to sports editor by first semester junior year. But I was already having an established column in the back once a week in my freshman year, second semester. So I had a journalism scholarship. I was established on the school newspaper. The career was there for me, but I wasn't in career mode. I wasn't even thinking about career. All I was thinking about is that, all right, this is what I chose to do, so I'm going to do it well. But I was leading a dual life because, to me, I was trying to get occult realizations. And I was totally into that, really. But that was my other life. So I was leading a life that was complete dichotomy, because sports writers aren't into that. Like said to me one time, "You became a devotee? Why did a sports writer become a devotee?" Said that to me. It was well after I was initiated. Already a Brahmin by that time. He said that to me. Anyway, he was expert at insulting people. And I was a victim one time. I tolerated it because he was sannyasi, but I didn't forget it. At any rate, once I started taking hallucinogens in second semester sophomore year, then the detachment from material stuff really increased significantly. I mean, that was the year, sophomore year, second semester was when the campuses exploded big time. And like in one of my classes, I should have got a D or a D minus. I got an A because he was against grades, so he gave everybody an A. I got a cheap A out of it. But at any rate, the point is, it didn't mean anything to me. So, that summer, and then the point of the matter is this. I was searching for a guru without knowing it. But from my end, there was effort. I came to that realization one night that there's thousands of philosophies, probably not thousands, there's hundreds maybe, whatever. But, so many philosophies, so many cults, so many religions, etc. Not that I had studied many of them, I hadn't. Like one of my best friends, his mother said, "You should become an attorney." She saw elements in me that would be excellent for an attorney, but it would have been a tremendously terrible choice for me to become an attorney. I could give a great opening and a great closing. I could get people off with the power of my closing that deserve to be convicted. But the fact is that to be an attorney, you have to study those law books. And I could never have done that. Because as soon as I start studying, I say, why am I loading my brain with this crap? I could have never done it. And sometimes devotees call me a scholar. As I've told all of you, I am no scholar at all. I'm a thinker. Yeah, I have maybe, 15 verses from Bhagavad Gita memorized, a few verses from the Bhagavatam memorized, and I know what they mean. But I'm a thinker. I'm a Muni. I'm not a scholar. There's a big difference. I'm not a man that can sit down and get heavy into studying things. That's not how I am. I produce. I'm a man of action. That's how I was always used in the movement. Now, I am a good writer, no doubt about that. But I was not used that way. In fact, there's only two things I ever wrote in the movement. Two Vyas Puj from Hawaii there, 76 and 75 and 76, did the Vyas Puj homage. And that's all I was ever allowed to write. Because they didn't use that for me. They knew this is a man of action, he gets things done. And that's exactly what I do. So the point of the matter is this. Before all of this, before I knew about Krishna, etc., I was searching for a guru without knowing I was searching for a guru. I didn't know that was the goal. I thought the goal was to figure out what is the absolute truth, and I didn't even use that term, absolute truth. And I was inclined to think that it's maybe going to turn out to be evil is supreme. I was inclined to think that was very possible. I won't say maybe probable, but somewhere between very possible and probable, somewhere in between. And if it was evil is supreme, then that's the way I'm going to go. If that's the way it is, that's the way I'm going to go. But of course, the actual truth is all good absolute is supreme. Even on this plane, ultimately. Ultimately. So, it's a two-way street if you're going to find a genuine guru. You have to show you deserve it. The demigods are going to be involved at all times. This idea that we're alone is a complete illusion. We're never alone. For a moment, for a split second. We have thousands of entities, some inimical to us, some favorable to us, some neutral, etc., and of course the Supreme Lord in the heart. They all know everything we're thinking, saying, and doing. They're producing the stuff. They're producing the thoughts. Desire is nothing but a subtle form of conditioning. You don't produce the desire. It's produced for you. You choose. And actually, as far as that goes, choosing, that's only in relation to free will. Otherwise, if you say, well, I got a blonde that likes me and a brunette who likes me and a redhead who likes me, I'll choose one of the three. You're destined to choose one of them or none of them or whatever it is, but it's destined, it's locked in. You think you're choosing, you're not choosing. It's already locked in. The point is that you have to show the demigods by the efforts you make, the risks you take, that you are actually searching for a guru. And if there's anything that's insincere about you, or not serious about you, or if you haven't cultivated enough knowledge, you men are not in that category. I'll tell you that right now. You men are not in the category that you have inadequate knowledge. Because you've been with me, many of you for a long time, some of you for a short time, doesn't matter. All of you have adequate knowledge right now to find a Diksha guru. Absolutely. So that one's out. But sincerity and seriousness, let's say there's a little bit of insincerity in there. Ooh. In other words, you'll come in contact with somebody, and he'll be just what you're looking for, which isn't a genuine guru, but appears to be. But at any rate, the point of the matter is this. It's a two-way street. I don't care what anybody says. It's a two-way street. But everything is the mercy of the Lord, and everything has to have his sanction. So how can finding a guru not have his sanction? To find a genuine guru, you have to show you fully deserve it. Now, then the question, the comebacker, and this is genuine comeback, will be, oh, but how many came to Prabhupada so easily? Right? I agree completely. I agree completely. Because he created this movement, and his movement was, very well known, especially in America and parts of Europe, and India also a little bit later. You could come into contact with his devotees and the chanting and the temples relatively easily. And therefore, you say, well, yeah, let's just take Vajravarna. Now, Vajravarna is favorable to us, favorable to me. But, okay. Well, Vajravarna was brought to the La Cienega temple there in Los Angeles, previous to the Watsika temple. And he went in. His mother brought him there. He didn't know about it. He didn't even know about the Hare Krishna movement. He was going to travel back. That was the plan. It wasn't not even an afterthought. He's traveling back to his home with his mother. He didn't. Said, sorry, Mom, I'm staying. Shave me up. She was just bringing him there so that he got a taste of Easter. She didn't know she was losing him. So he wasn't really searching. But he came into contact, liked it, said, shave me up, I'm staying by, to his mother. So some people came easy, some people paid the price. And they paid it severely. Like I said, that temple on Livingston was only 2 blocks away from me. And also, I believe all of them, but if not all of them, one for sure and probably 2 of my roommates knew about the Hare Krishna movement. But they never said anything to me because they were against it. And they didn't want me to get into it and to, research it. Of course, one of them gave me Be Here Now, so I contacted Prabhupada that way in the appendix. But the point of the matter is this. It was only 2 blocks away, and I had no knowledge of it, no knowledge of the Krishna conscious movement, even though I was, undergoing severe risks, severe austerities in my own way, concocted shit, but nevertheless severe. So I was showing the Paramatma without knowing I was doing that. I was showing him, I really want it. I really want to know. I really want to get it the way it is. Again, I didn't even know what it would be. I knew it wouldn't be Christianity. That was already down pat. And of course, I wasn't into Islam or Judaism, the Talmudic stuff. And so those things were out. But in regard to philosophy, in regard to cults, etc. So the point of the matter is this. As far as I'm concerned, the mercy of the Lord is his sanction. And if he sanctions you to come in contact with a bona fide Diksha Guru, then you have to recognize the Diksha Guru. You contact him as one mercy, but there's more than that. You contact, that's the mercy. You recognize, that's the mercy. Then is there more? Sure, there's more. You have to surrender. Then he has to accept you. He might put you through severe trials and tribulations because he sees things that need to be burned out. Does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Vijay, any philosophical questions this week?
Yes, Prabhu. Last week we talked about how, based on a nectar of instructions, instruction number 2, over-endeavoring for mundane accomplishments was totally discouraged there by Rupa Goswami. Is over-endeavoring on the devotional path encouraged?
Well, I'll modify your question in order to answer it in the way that you really want it to be answered. Not that it was asked in a faulty way, but it was asked in a way that really where you're not coming from. It's the bright-eyed bushy tail is what it is. I've seen a lot of it. And it's these devotees who come to the movement and immediately are bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and oh yes, I'm such a active devotee. I'm so enthused. I'm so invigorated. All I want to do is serve, and look at my service attitude. Not that they say that. And bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, yeah, you know. There was, in particular, one devotee stands out to me. He and I joined almost the same time. He was ahead of me by what, a month? Who knows? Something like that. So, but he was always like in the bright-eyed, bushy tail, you know, ati bhakti. In other words, you know, such a devotee, etc. But I could see that he wasn't deep-rooted. Not that I was, you know, I was friendly to him. We were competitors out there on the pick, and I wasn't good at the pick. I was average. I was slightly above average because I was so heavy, but that wasn't his style. His style was completely different. He was friend to everybody. And like we would get our vegetables at the market there in downtown Chicago, the market, and he'd make friends with all those guys, and he'd come and get all kinds of lettuce and this and that and the other thing. And I wasn't envious of him because that style didn't appeal to me at all. So why could I? Anyway, I'm not an envious guy. I don't have trouble with envy. I don't have trouble with that negative energy whatsoever. But the point is that, you know, I could see it's not deeply rooted. And I don't believe he survived when the 70s came to a close. I never heard about him being anywhere active. You know, that's the thing. If you're not deeply rooted, you're not going to survive when the cataclysms come. And the cataclysm of 1978 was colossal. It was a tidal wave. And if you weren't like at least a mile from the beach, well situated, you were in trouble. Using that as an analogy. Now, in regard to your specific question, over-endeavoring. You over-endeavor when you're trying to impress. You over-endeavor when you don't know your limitations, when you don't recognize your adhikar. And the bright-eyed bushy-tail do that because they jump up and they're like a fully realized, fully in bliss. You know, they project I'm in bliss, constant smile. Man, oh man, I wasn't in bliss very often in those early days, in those early weeks, in those early months. Because it was tough. Because I was following, and it was tough in so many ways. And bliss wasn't the thing I was after anyway. I was after the initiations. I was after the link. I was after power, but not power in the cult, personal spiritual power. Knowledge was important to me. Realization was important to me. Detachment was important to me. Personal power, not institutional power, was important to me. But I had things going against me. Lots of things going against me. I can detail those if you want. But the point of the matter is that bliss wasn't a big thing for me and was experienced now and then, but wasn't a big thing. But these bright-eyed, bushy-tail, over-endeavor types, Bliss is the big thing they project. And they act not according to their adhikar. They're not as deep-rooted to be acting like that, to be projecting as if they're in bliss, as if they're in bhava. They're not. They're over-endeavoring to project a persona that they haven't realized yet, and therefore is not their adhikar. A man's got to know his limitations. How you make advancement in Krishna consciousness is you act according to your adhikar, and then you're blessed by the Guru and Krishna that your adhikar increases. That's the method. And then you act according to the next adhikar increase, which is incremental, not huge. Now, in relation to becoming from a kanishta to a madhyam, that's a major event. There's a shock. It's a minor shock, but there's a shock in that. And from becoming a madhyam to an uttama, there's a major shock, huge shock. So yes, in those, there's a quantum leap. To go from neophyte to a madhyam is a quantum leap in perspective. And going from a madhyam to an uttama is a huge quantum leap. A major shock will be involved in that realization of purity. But the point of the matter is that over-endeavoring is simply a symptom when a devotee is engaging in quote-unquote devotional service, over-endeavoring for achievements. It's nothing but a symptom of trying to project to others that you're at a level that you're not at, which frankly I never appreciated. I never liked it, but at the same time I considered it, a minor factor. It's not like it's corruption. It's not on that level. So, the levels where I really detested, like arrogance, I detested arrogance in a big way, and I had a lot of problems with people laying arrogant shit on me. There's certain things I really detested, but this, over-endeavoring, I didn't laugh at it, I didn't detest it, I didn't like it. It's as simple as that. Does this answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Go, Kulananda, any philosophical questions this week?
Yes. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says that both Brahma and Shiva are under the influence of Maya. My question is how can such advanced demigods be under the influence of Maya, and are they aware of this but happy in their service anyway?
This is a big fulcrum point. It's an excellent question, obviously, but it's a big fulcrum point. Because actually, you weren't present last week, but we discussed this to some degree, whether all of you remember or not, in relation to the Tattvavadis. Because the Tattvavadis say Brahma was never under illusion. That's part of their gig. Swami Narayan and Mathura also said the same thing. Gaudiya Mutt, some of those, they also. The answer is this. Both for Lord Brahma, who's vastly superior to any of us, and Lord Shiva, who's vastly superior to any of us, have two features. One feature is that of leader of the Sampradaya, and the other feature is demigod. When they take the role of demigod, sometimes they're under Maya to some degree. However, it is in the category of achintya. In other words, no human being should bother to use intelligence to try to figure it out. It's achintya. It's inconceivable how it works. They're always protected. They're leaders of the Sampradayas. Madhvacharya comes from Lord Brahma, and Vishnu Swami comes from Lord Shiva. Those two Sampradayas are the four. Of course, I always say there's really 5 Sampradayas, because as far as I'm concerned, Lord Chaitanya established a 5th Sampradaya. And my main argument why that's so is that why did Baladev Vidyabhushana write a separate commentary on Vedanta Sutra called Govindavasya if it wasn't a separate Sampradaya? But there's a link to Madhvacharya in it. So, Madhva Gaudiya, Vaishnava Sampradaya. But I still consider it the 5th Sampradaya. Although the counter argument would be Padma Purana only says there's 4 Sampradayas. So at any rate. The point of the matter is that Lord Shiva is head of a sampradaya, Lord Brahma is head of a sampradaya. When they're acting as guru, head of the sampradaya, they're completely perfect. When they're acting as demigods, usually they're perfect. But sometimes there's an element that's achintya, where they're still under the influence of Maya. And that's the best I can do for you. Does this answer your question, Gokulananda?
Oh, it does. That makes sense. Thank you. And I appreciate your excellent answers to Bhakta Ernest's questions and Bhakta Vijaya's excellent question. Thank you.